Hello, audacious coders. My name is Shawn, and I will be your instructor today. You're watching part 4 of the Data Science and Machine Learning series on the Coding with Shawn channel. And before I say anything else, I do want to quickly note that because I felt like there was more I needed to teach you, instead of having these Markdown basics in 2 parts, they're going to be in 3 parts. So please do be aware of that, just so that there is no confusion between why in the first part it says that there's only 2, but I'm now saying that there are 3, and the reason for that is because I do want to teach you a little bit more. And so let's talk about what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to start out talking about some shortcuts that we have not already talked about in the first part. And then we're going to talk about something called block quotes. We're going to do a lot with block quotes, including making it in multiple paragraphs, nesting them, using them with other elements, and much more too. After that, we're going to do lists. Now, we have done lists in the first part, but that was very, very ground scratching and we didn't really go into much depth. So here we're going to go into more depth and hopefully you're going to understand more. So we're going to, of course, do the ordered lists, the unordered list, and we're going to talk about some good and bad things to do with them. And we're also going to talk about how to add other elements or external elements in lists. Then we're going to talk about adding little block quotes, code blocks, images, and lists in lists. And then we are going to top this part off with code. We're going to talk about not actual code, but just putting code within Markdown. We're going to talk about escaping backticks and code blocks. After that, we're going to end this one and you can move on to part 3. And there you can wrap up your knowledge of Markdown. And without further ado, let's begin. So, we, of course, are in the second part of the Markdown basics on this series. So please do watch the first part of this Markdown basics part of our series, because if you don't, then you're not going to understand very well what we're going to do here. So make sure you do go back and watch the first part of Markdown basics. But if you have, let's go ahead and begin. So the first thing you need to do, of course, is open your Jupyter notebook. If you're on Windows, you should just be able to type Jupyter here and have it pop up. If you're on Mac, you can type in your Spotlight search, which should be right around here. And if you have customized it, then it should just be wherever you have customized it. And if you still can't find it, fear not, just go ahead and find it in your Finder or your file folder. Now, this was a very fast opening because this computer is very fast. But if you have a slower computer, it may not have opened just fast, so go ahead and pause the video until yours opens. But if yours has opened and everything's worked good, let's go ahead and open our Markdown Basics notebook. And here we can see what we did last time. So last time, in our part 1, we started off with just some basic code to make sure that everything was in working order. Then we just gave a short introduction to Markdown, which was this paragraph here. Then we made a few lists as just so you could get a feeling for what Markdown was. We did an unordered list and an ordered list, the Markdown way and the HTML way. Then we did headings. Headings are very, very important in Markdown. We talked about the Markdown way, the HTML way. We talked about some alternate ways we could do them. And we talked about some do's and don'ts because, of course, there are do's and don'ts with everything, and Markdown is not an exception to that rule. Then we talked about paragraphs. Paragraphs are very, very useful in Markdown and in HTML, so we talked about both ways. And we talked about a very, very important thing, which was if a paragraph is not in a list, do not indent them with spaces or tabs. And after that, we talked about line breaks, which was here when we did the first line and the second line. Then we talked about quite a few do's and don'ts with line breaks, because line breaks are definitely one of those things where if you mess up, you can cause some serious issues with your formatting, so do be very aware of that. But then we talked about emphasis. Our emphasis is, of course, bold and italic, and we did quite a few things. We started out with the Markdown and HTML ways for bold. We talked about the do's and don'ts for bold, because there are definitely do's and don'ts with bold. We talked about the Markdown and HTML ways for italic, same thing with HTML and Markdown. and we talked about the do's and don'ts, very similar do's and don'ts for bold and italic. But then we did them together, bold and italic, on a single word or phrase, and then we talked about the do's and don'ts for that. And so go ahead and make sure that you have understood all of these things. But if you have, then let's go ahead and talk about what we're going to be doing today. So today, in a very short just glimpse of what we're going to be doing today, we're going to be doing block quotes, lists, code, horizontal rules, links, images, escaping characters, and talk about HTML in Markdown. Now we have a lot to do today, so let's not waste any more time and let's begin. So we're first going to be talking about some shortcuts that we didn't talk about in our previous part, and the reason is that when we are talking about Markdown, what's more important than shortcuts is knowing the basic way to do something. So we talked about the fundamental way to do something, which was either bold, italic, line breaks, etc. But now we're going to talk about some special shortcuts which you may not know about quite yet. So the first shortcut is going to be with our Markdown. So of course we talked about the way to enable Markdown with going up here, clicking Markdown, and then doing whatever we need to do here. But there is another way. So let's go ahead and cut this cell, make a new cell. So if we type M here, it's just going to literally type the letter M. Not very useful unless we're trying to type something with an M, but we can use this letter M for a shortcut to get to Markdown. So click on this side of the cell, on the left side of the cell here where there's a lot of space, just click it, and this should turn into this cyan blue color. And now click M. If you do, you'll notice that this has automatically became Markdown. And you can type in here, let's say this is the shortcut to Markdown. And it works just as you would expect any other piece of Markdown to work. And it's very, very useful because all you have to do is click M, which can save you an immense amount of time when trying to switch here. But do note that the same cannot be said about code. For code, if you press C, it's not going to do anything. So make sure that you are only changing it to Markdown using the shortcut when necessary, or you'll actually end up doubling your work. So go ahead and do your M for Markdown. Make sure everything works properly. Now, if you are using an older version of Anaconda, or an older version of Markdown, or your system is not compatible, the shortcut may not work. For any modern system, you would expect it to work, but if your computer is older, your software is older, or anything of that sort, then it may not work, and that is kind of disappointing, but unfortunately some systems to this day will not support this awesome shortcut. So if it doesn't, then that probably just means that your system does not support it. But go ahead and make sure that you are actually clicking on the side and this turns blue, otherwise the shortcut will not work. So do make sure that you are doing the shortcut properly, because otherwise of course it will not work. Now the next short we're going to be talking about is for bold. So go ahead and use your shortcut to turn it to Markdown, or of course just change it from the here default. But so that what we're going to do here is we're going to use our strong, right? We can use our strong, which is of course our HTML tag, and inside it we can put this is the strong tag for bold, right? And then we have to put our closing strong, and boom, it works just as good. It just shows you everything in bold. There's no special formatting, nothing. It's just that simple, right? But there is another way. We can just put B instead of taking the time to put a strong. We can simply put B and put this is the B tag for bold, and then a closing B here. And it also worked just as good. So of course the reason I didn't show you the shortcut was because we need to know the fundamental way to do it before the shortcuts. But the other reason is because B is not descriptive. If you give this to someone who doesn't know anything about code, which if you are an academic professional, I promise you'll be handing your code to someone who has no idea how it works at some point in your life. But either way, strong is it gives you a pretty good description of what's going to happen. It's going to, make it stronger. If in this case it's going to make it bold. It's more descriptive than simply B. I mean, B could mean anything. It could mean ball, bat, anything, and it's not very useful for when you are trying to add a general programming, when you're trying to hand it to someone who doesn't know much about code. Strong is much more descriptive than B, and it's also more descriptive for you yourself because it'll give you a better idea. But the shortcut is still useful if you are in a very big rush, so I did want to teach you that. Now, there's the same can also be said about italic. Of course, I taught you the EM tag for italic, so we can write here. This is the EM tag for italic, and then a closing EM. Make sure you have switched to Markdown before you run the cell. And of course, it works perfectly. It gives us our italic just as we expect it to. But there is also a shortcut for italic. The shortcut is simply I. And again, the reason I did not show you this previously is because it does not help you when you are trying to be descriptive, and it's not going to be helpful for other people trying to read your code. That is why the EM tag, because it is a academically known tag for bold. And since, quite frankly, HTML is much more popular than Markdown, more people will understand the EM tag than will understand simply I. Again, I could mean a lot of things, so we're trying to just be as descriptive as possible, but I will also work just as good. We can type, this is the I tag for italic. And another reason that the shortcuts are not always good is because not all Markdown applications will support all these shortcuts. Jupyter Notebook in this case is very powerful, and we're lucky enough to have all these shortcuts work, but they're not always going to work. So we want to be very careful to make sure that we are not doing something that's not going to work in all instances. So just be aware that although these shortcuts are working here, they may not necessarily work in every Markdown application or every Markdown editor. So be sure to be aware of that. But those were the shortcuts I wanted to show you before we begin today. They are incredibly useful shortcuts, especially when you're trying to, especially when you are short on time. So make sure that you are aware of these shortcuts, but also make sure that you are aware that they may not always work. Now, we're going to start with the actual content for today. The first is going to be block quotes. So, block quotes are normally used for citations. What they really do is they just put what we call a block quote onto the side of any given piece of text, and that allows you to not only highlight it, but is also a commonly used way to cite something. So let's go ahead and write a piece of a block quote part. So let's go ahead, and the block quotes are enabled with this. So we call this a greater than symbol if we are talking mathematically or academically. But again, we are not talking about mathematics or academics here, so we're just going to refer to this as our block quote, block quote indicator. So I like calling this a block quote indicator because this is what signals that a block quote is coming. So let's go ahead and write something with our block quote. So the first thing we're just going to write is, I like to code with IPython in Jupyter Notebook. Right? And then make sure this is Markdown. And boom, would you check that out? We have our block quote. Super simple block quote here. You can see that this block quote indicator is here, which signals it's a block quote. You can also tell, sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to tell because of the fact that this background is white, but the key signal for you that this is a block quote is that you can see this indent, and it is a little bit more unique than a regular indent. And if you zoom in, of course, it's a lot more clear that that is a block quote. So that's a super simple block quote. Let's talk now about block quotes with multiple paragraphs. So all we've got to do is put the same thing. So let's say I love to code in IPython, right? And then line down. Now, this is super important. Make sure you're not leaving empty lines. Even if you're not writing anything, make sure you still leave our block quote indicator in the middle anyway before writing your other sentence, because there are no such things as spaces or or lines that are empty, because we have to be very, very careful as to not cause formatting issues. So make sure you do leave an empty block quote indicator there anyway. But let's write the IPython processor is awesome, right? And then would you check that out? We have a space in between because we used our block quote indicator. And just to show you, if we take this out, it's going to leave a space in between, and that space is ugly and we do not want that space there. And so that helps us have one single bar, and that makes it look not only more clean but also more professional, and it's more accurate. So now let's talk about nested block quotes. So block quotes can be nested. If you have watched my Python for Beginners series, you know about a nested loop, which allows us to run things over and over again and different things. So block quotes can also be nested. We just have to add a double block quote where we want to write. So let's just go ahead and try it out. So I'm gonna make a block quote here, a standard one, put a space, and write coding with Shawn, right? Of course, we do not leave spaces ever, so we put a standard one there. Now we put 2 here, and we can put Python for beginners, right? And now would you look at that? We have a block quote inside of a block quote, and that's the point of nested block quotes. And we can do this forever. Now we just put 2 here. We put 1, 2, 3, and we can put Python for beginners lesson 1, right? Boom, we have 3 now. We can just do this forever. We can do, for example, getting started with Python, right? And would you look at that? Now we have 4. And again, we can do this forever. It'll just get the lines longer and longer, and it may take more time for the processor. Python is a very slow language. So, but point is, we can do this forever. We can do writing our first line of code, or rather Python code. Boom, now we have 5, and again, we can do this forever. I'm not going to take you to this forever. Let's do one more, just to show the almost infinite possibility here. We can put hello world, right? And boom, that is a tremendously large nested loop, and you can see that the size of the text is not at all getting smaller, and neither is the size of the last block quote. Instead, what's happening is that the previous block quote is getting a little larger, the one before it's getting even more larger, same thing all the way to the back. If we had millions of these, of course, this lines would be absolutely tremendously large, but that's not the point. The point is this was successful, and we can now do nested loops. I'm hoping that you can now do as many nested loops as you want. Go ahead and practice, try more, just see what you can do with them. It's really, really cool. Now, let's talk about block quotes with external elements, or block quotes with other elements. So, about block quotes with other elements, they can contain let's go from scratch. Block quotes can contain other or external Markdown formatted elements. So not all elements can be used in all cases, so you'll have to be able to experiment, which of course we can always do as developers, to see which ones work. So let's try some of our other elements. So let's first change this to Markdown actually, and then let's put 4 of our hashes to signal heading 4, or of course a subheading, a sub-subheading more like it, but let's put round of applause to Google for an amazing fiscal year. And truly indeed, Google, congratulations to you, because you actually did have an amazing fiscal year last year, or rather last fiscal year. Alright, remember, we always leave our and we actually want a block quote indicator there. We never put spaces, remember that. We can put profits were higher than ever, which is actually not true, but it's close. It's really close. Revenue is off the chart. It truly was. Right, we can put, again, we never ever leave spaces, so make sure you put an empty block quote indicator there. And then everything is going as we want it to. Boom, we have now written an entire section of block quotes with external elements. Let's run this, and would you look at that? We have one tremendously large block quote. We have a heading here, which is, it's like actually a sub heading, but point is we have our heading with our 4 hashes here. We also have our bullet points here. We have one for profits were higher than ever, and one for revenue is off the chart. And you can see this is another shortcut for bullet points. We don't only have to use our unordered list. We can use this minus, we can use plus, we can use our asterisk. There's a lot of different things we can use. But point is, we used our bullet points here to make profits were higher than ever and revenue is off the chart. Everything is going as we want it to. And that is really a well-made block quote, because it has all of the important elements of a block quote. And we also learned another shortcut here. I'm not just saying that as a joke. We actually should know that we can use asterisks, pluses, and minuses to indicate bullet points. But that was block quotes with external elements. So let's go ahead and once again, we're going to finish off block quotes with a bang before moving off to our next topic. So let's go ahead and write a bit of awesome block quotes. So let's put a heading here, and that is actually the wrong way for our, I put in a block quote indicator rather than a symbol less than symbol. So we put H1 for our heading 1. These are our largest headings. Let's put block quote finisher, right? Then our closing H1 tag. And this is very good because it proves to you that Markdown does indeed support all of HTML, and Jupyter Notebook is also a very good processor because it allows us for Markdown to include all of HTML, because not all processors will allow you to use all of HTML. Well, and Jupyter Notebook is incredibly good at allowing almost, but not all of HTML. So anyway, we have our heading 1. Let's now put a paragraph, and let's actually act like we're going to cite something. So let's say you're trying to cite me, Coding with Shawn. Here is a citation from Coding with Shawn, right? And then we can put a closing paragraph tag. Then we're going to use block quote cite. All right, and we're gonna put https://www.youtube.com/coding with Shawn, right? No big deal there. We close that off, right? All right, let's write for many months PyCharm has been getting better and better. However, we can all agree that for data science and machine learning, Jupyter Notebooks, or rather Notebook, is perhaps on top. Right, no big deal there either. We just need to add a closing block quote. And the reason I'm doing this is to show you that we truly do indeed use our our block quotes for the primary purpose of citations, though of course we do use them for lots of different things. However, if you go ahead and glance your eyes here, you can see that we have an amazingly well done citation. You can see that we put our website, it's completely gone to allow a almost completely non-cluttered, no drama, super visible, clear, and just beautiful, aesthetic almost citation here. And so if that, the whole reason for this is that we have a simple, easily visible citation here. And if someone really does want to learn more, they can double click here. They can see all of the important things. They could, copy and paste this if they needed to, if they wanted more about the citation. But this is a super useful way. And this is perhaps the main reason why block quotes are so awesome. They're used primarily for citations, but boy, are they amazing at citations. So that was block quotes in a glance, and we also went quite in depth to block quotes there. So now we're going to talk about lists. Now, if you remember back to part 1, at the very beginning, we did talk a little bit about lists. We even made an ordered and unordered list. However, we honestly just did that to talk about Markdown. But now we're going to actually seriously talk about lists, both unordered and ordered. So let's go ahead and talk about it now. So first we're going to talk about it, then we're going to write. So let's start with ordered lists. So to create an ordered list the Markdown way, we add items with numbers followed with periods. They don't have to be in numerical order, but the list has to start with the number 1. So let's go ahead and try a few examples the Markdown way. So let's first just do, and first we actually have to change this to Markdown, but let's put one, I'm not sure, let's put 1 sharks, 2 large fish, 3 small fish, and 4 tiny fish, right? No big deal. If we run this, we get everything just as we want it to be. And the only necessary thing here is that it starts with 1. We can actually also just do 1, 1, 1, and 1, and we will still have everything work properly. Same order, no difference. We just have to make sure that it starts with 1. After that, everything will be in numerical order. We don't have to deal with it. In fact, if we wanted to, we could even do something really weird, like 1, 9, I don't know, 1, 9, 4, 2. Same thing, we'll still get 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, 3, and 4. There's actually no way around this, no matter what. You're going to get 1, 2, 3, and 4. Of course, unless you actually use bypass commands. So let's talk about the HTML way. We did talk a little bit about this in the beginning, but let's still do it once again. So we're making an ordered list, so we want the OL tag. Remember, we need to make sure we're in Markdown mode. We use the OL tag. Then here, we want the LI tag. Inside it, whatever we want. So let's put sharks. And I actually recommend that you copy and paste these at the end to save a lot of precious time. Right? Sharks, large fish, small fish, and tiny fish. And then we use our closing OL tag. And we're not quite ready to run this yet because we need to add our closing LIs too. The reason I don't like doing it beforehand is because it really just wastes a lot of time. It's much easier to just add them afterward. But if we run this, we can see we get the exact same output. There is no difference in terms of what happened here. Right? And so unlike Markdown, we cannot really customize the way we do this. So we can't, we cannot like not put the closing li tag. We cannot use alternatives like we did in Markdown with just the 1111 or the 1835, or rather, sorry, the 1942. So anyway, that is really the basics of an ordered list, and that is all you're going to need to do. Let me give you a few words on it though before we continue. So Some markup languages let you use a parenthesis as a delimiter. So like, for example, one first item, but not all of them allow it, so it's not a good perspective. So for example, what I'm trying to say here is that some will allow you to go like this. One sharks, two large fish. I'm not going to do more than that just because for the sake of time. And you can see here that even Jupyter Notebook doesn't allow you to do that. Some will, most don't. So make sure that you are using periods, even though some of the time it will be more convenient for you to use parentheses. Jupyter Notebook, once again, does not support the delimiters. Now, let's talk about unordered lists. As we talked about above, to make those bullet points, we don't have to use only a certain thing. We can use dashes, asterisks, or plus signs. So the Markdown method here, let's just put minuses here. We can put, sharks, and then another dash. We can put large fish, small fish, tiny fish, right? No big deal. We run this, and we change it to Markdown, and we run this. We get a perfect unordered list with proper bullet points. No big deal, once again. We can also use asterisks, as I said. First, let's change this to Markdown. We can use asterisks, same deal. Sharks, large fish, small fish, and tiny fish. Right, once again, no big deal. We just have our bullet points as we expected and as you should have gotten. But now we can also use a mix, in case you didn't know. First, we can put our pluses the same way. Sharks, large fish, small fish, and tiny fish. Right, once again, no difficulty. It's going to give us the same result if we have done it properly. Yep, and there we go. We get the exact same result. Now, what's cool, though, is that we can also, if we want, use a mixture of them. So we can do, plus, sharks, dash, large fish, asterisk, small fish, and then let's just use plus again, tiny fish. And if we do this, because the ordered lists do not have a specific order, it gives us the exact same result, luckily. And let's talk about the HTML way. We, again, likewise with the unordered list, we also used the HTML method at the very beginning of part 1. But let's still do it here because we didn't talk about it in great detail. So we use our li tag here too, just the same way we do in our ordered lists. And then let's put sharks again. Same way, just the only difference with ordered and unordered lists for the HTML is the tag at the beginning and end. Instead of OL, it's UL, and vice versa. We can put large fish once again. Then we can put our small fish. And sometimes it may seem like it's overdoing it to do so much for practice. But guys, when you're programming, anything can go wrong. I mean, guys, think about how vast a computer's network is. 1 trillion things could go wrong within the computer and with your commands. So make sure that you are constantly making sure that you have done everything right. So let's go ahead and put our closing UL tag. UL. Right, no big deal here either. If we run this, and actually we do need to add our closing slashes for the li tags too. Don't want to forget that. And if we do, same thing as usual, we get our bulleted points the same way we would in our Markdown. Again, no customizability here with HTML. You have to do it like this. But let's talk about indenting. So with indenting, we can just move things a little bit over into like to the side, as sort of like we did with the block quotes. We moved it a little bit to the side, and we also made it a little bit unique. In this case, we're not going to be doing anything to make it unique, but we are going to be moving it to the side, and it's going to be a super simple procedure. So let's just use our minuses. We don't have to, but why not? Sharks. Whoops. Sharks, right? Large fish. Small fish. And tiny fish. Once again, no big difficulties with that, but now we have to add indented items, right? So what we want to do here is not anything terribly important. We just have to move over 4 spaces, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, a dash, and we can put indented item. Let's literally just type indented item, and then indented item number 2. And actually we cannot use the hyphens because, sorry, not the hyphen, we cannot use the hashes because it will point to something else, but it still works the same way. And let's just put closing. We don't have to, but it's more elegant. Let's run this, and now you can see that although I did say nothing's going to be unique, I guess if you want to consider it so, we do have squares in the indented items instead of circles, but it's a very minor difference, and it still is really the same thing, just moved over. And the reason that we don't just add spaces, the reason we add a specific amount of spaces for certain reasons, is because we want to make sure that the interpreter realizes and understands the fact that this is indented, because otherwise we can have formatting issues, and nobody, and I mean nobody, likes formatting issues. But we can also do this the HTML way. So we just do our UL tag once again here. We do enter, right? Okay, and then same thing here. Actually, let's just go ahead and go back to the part where we did it earlier to save time. So just go ahead and copy that and paste it here. And there's just a small thing we're going to do. I want you to put an enter between the large fish and small fish, and then put not a closing, but a standard UL tag here, an opening one, right? And then just put indented item within li tags here. Indented item, right? No difference with the li tags, you still need a closing for there. We can put li indented item 2. Once again, no complications here, just make sure you have your closing slash there. And then here you put a closing UL tag, right? And then run this. Boom. Same thing here. You have your 2 indents here in both the Markdown and the HTML ways. Again, HTML is perhaps just as powerful, if not more powerful, than your standard Markdown. It has more capability, actually, and so you can normally do more, or at least just as much, perhaps even more with HTML than you can with the standard Markdown syntax. So never consider HTML to be lesser than Markdown. And so let's talk about some best practices with the unordered lists. So Markdown applications, once again, do not agree on how to handle different delimiters within the same list. So for compatibility's sake, try not to mix and match delimiters in the same list. Pick one and stick with it. So even though I did show you we could do plus and then, n value, right? We could do minus n value and asterisk n value. It will work in Jupyter Notebook, mind you. There's no problem with Jupyter Notebook's handling of this, but it's not good because compatibility is a very big thing within computer programming, and not all Markdown applications will be as amazing as Jupyter Notebook and support it so nicely. So for compatibility's sake, try and just use one type, so just the dashes, or just the plus signs, or just the asterisks. I'm not saying one of them is better than the other, but try to stick to simply one of them because it is much, much, much better for compatibility. So let's talk about adding elements in lists. To add another element while preserving the continuity of the list, we just indent the element 4 spaces or 1 tab, depending on your preference, as we are going to do right now. So, paragraphs, super simple here, no big deal. We just put an asterisk, actually. Let's put an asterisk here. This is item 1. And I forgot my is here. Make sure it is in Markdown mode. We put an enter. This is item 2. Put 4 spaces or 1 tab. Preferably 4 spaces because it helps with compatibility. Another paragraph below item 2. And then we can go back. This is item 3. Right, go ahead and run this. And boom, it does work properly. However, some of the time we will need to add a space here to actually make it work exactly the way we want it to. So if we add a space, then it actually allows us to preserve it being in. So again, if we don't keep our space here, it will be on the same line. So do make sure that you are adding your space here. But if we do add our space, you can see that it does stay exactly here. It preserves the continuity of our list, and it keeps it exactly the way we want it to, so that we can use our list as usual. And if we put 4 spaces here, it's better because it allows us to move it more to the side so that it fits in with the list instead of goes too far to the left. And this allows us to super easily preserve the continuity of the list, yet still have a separate element within the list itself, actually. So the next thing we're going to talk about is block quotes. And I know we already talked about block quotes, but this is a block quote within the list. So for example, let's actually just copy and paste this here in the next cell. And then, of course, make sure the cell is already in Markdown mode using the shortcut or the standard method. And then, again, 4 spaces. And then our block quote indicator, which of course is just a greater than sign. If we run this, now you can see that we literally have a block quote inside a list, and the list is still complete with no issues whatsoever. And so it just is amazingly helpful and useful for developing and programming in general. So that is what we're going to be dealing with here, but there is more before we move on. So code blocks are normally indented 4 spaces or 1 tab, again depending on your preference. But when they're in a list, we indent them 8 spaces or 2 tabs. Let's talk about what I'm talking about here. Let's write what we're talking about here. I could put 1, open the file, 2, find the code block. Right? And then we put 2 tabs or 4 spaces. In this case, I'm going to put 2 tabs because 8 spaces is, it's not fun to count. Right? And then we can put head, whoops. Right? And then title, testing, title. Right? No complications here either. What we can do here is close off our head too, using the same command, just with a closing slash. Alright, and then we can go back here and put 3, update the title. Right? And actually, what we have here is it works perfectly good here. If you decide to move this up 1, then it will still work fine. So in this case, what I mean is move it like that. And that, unfortunately, that part in particular will mess it up. But if we move this entire thing 1 up, then it will work exactly the way we want it to. So let's try this. So if we do this, you can see that our list is still in order. 1, 2, 3. If we put more, it would still work. In fact, let's put more. 4, celebrate. Right? It works fine, even though we have literally just inserted a random code block within a code block. Sorry, instead it was because we have literally inserted a code block within a ordered list. You would imagine that everything would just completely get messed up. But because of the amazingness of Markdown and the Markdown processor within Jupyter Notebook, everything works perfectly. So, the next thing we're going to do is actually images. So, we are still, once again, we are still within lists. We're just talking about adding different elements within lists. So, one, open the image of, whatever. Just put hyphens there because I'll find an image and we'll use whatever image. Marvel at how amazing it looks. Right? And then 3, close it. Whoops. Alright. Go ahead and just go on to Google here. And we can search for anything here, but let's search for Linux mascot. Alright, so of course the Linux mascot is called Tux, but I like calling it Penguin. Anyway, go ahead and just click Save Image As. It will take a second. Open your folder. We're just going to save this. Right? And then this is super important here. This is a little bit ahead of what we've learned so far, but I still like it because it teaches us how to do this properly. Let's actually first add a line here. Make sure it's Markdown. And then we can do insert image. We can simply drag this here, or you can click choose file if you need to. Alright, we can copy this. We can literally insert this here, putting a tab or 2 spaces. Once again, your preference. Put an enter, right? And run this, of course, in Markdown. And you can see, of course, in this case, my image has not been able to load. But you can see that it has worked perfectly. Of course, the image sometimes will fail. Like in this case, we had a processing error, so our image did not load. But you can see that the image, if the image would have loaded, then just like the code block or just like the block quote, it would have worked perfectly. And that is just the marvel of not only Tux, but at general Markdown and Jupyter Notebook. It's so amazing how useful this is, even though I like calling it a note-taking language. Lastly, we're going to talk about code. Now, again, this is still a little bit ahead of what we've learned so far, but it is just to show you. And again, a lot of this may not work for you may not work out for you. So what I've done is, of course, as usual and as always, I've attached this just entire notebook that we're using today into the description below, which you can download and use for reference in case these things are not working out for you. So go ahead and do that right now, just in case, so that you have something to refer to in case your Jupyter Notebook is not working properly. Now, go ahead and make sure it's in Markdown. For me, it is. So what we do is we just put it in backticks. So at the CMD, type, and in backticks, nano, and then a period. Boom. It has code. You can see that it has been called as code. We're going to learn code in just a second, but you can see here that it has been counted as code. Everything works properly. We can do this the HTML way as well. Let's do that at the command prompt, which is CMD, of course. Type and our code tag, nano / nano, right? No big deal here either. If we run this, same deal here, everything works perfectly. We're going to talk about code a little bit more in just a second, but you can see how wonderfully the integration works between our standard code, text, block quotes, whatever, and Markdown. And this is the beauty of Markdown, truly indeed. So let us now move on to talking about code, which we actually just started out here. So yeah, let's go on to code right now. Alright guys, congratulations on making it to this point. We have now finished off our lists portion of this video, and we are now going to talk about code. Now, if you look here, there's going to be a code, a markdown, a raw NB convert, and a heading. Now, we're not talking about this code. We're talking about certain code within Markdown itself. So don't think that we're actually using the code yet. We're still on Markdown, but this is sort of code within Markdown. So there is of course a Markdown and an HTML way to do this code. So let's first do the Markdown way. The Markdown way is super simple. It's just you have to enclose whatever you're trying to denote as code in backticks, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to put when programming, use backticks, and we're actually going to put a backtick here to denote code, and another backtick here. And if we run this, you can see that this has been put in this code type format because we used those backticks. So super useful to use those backticks, and also super effective. Now, the other method is the HTML method. I'd like to remind you this entire notebook is in the description below, just in case you need something to, just in case you're having any issues with what we're doing here. So, what we're going to put is the same thing, when programming, use, but instead of backticks, we're going to literally just put code. Literally, there's nothing wrong here. All we put is code. We're not doing anything special. For code in HTML, we literally put code, and we're gonna put backticks to denote code, and then a closing slash, and then code, right? Same thing, no difference. We're getting the exact same output either way we do it. So that is a super simple way that we can do simple code. But let's talk about escaping backticks. So if the word or phrase or sentence you want to denote as code includes one or more backticks, you can escape it by enclosing the word or phrase or sentence in double backticks. So the way we do this is super simple. We put 2 backticks here, and of course we want to make sure it is in Markdown mode, and we put 2 backticks, use, and then 1 backtick, code, and whoops, another backtick on the other side of code in your Markdown document, right? And then 2 more backticks here. So now what we get is the entire thing in code, but you see, if now that we use double backticks at the beginning and end, we have preserved this backtick. It's still counting as a backtick. If we had just used a singular backtick, it would have completely messed up everything here, because you can see that everything has been counted, but the code, because it is in 2 backticks, it is enclosed in 1 backtick itself, it is going to completely mess up the formatting for the code part. So make sure you are using double backticks if you want to escape any certain pair of backticks anywhere in your code. There's also an escape method in HTML, and that is going to be the we're going to start with code once again, as we did last time. So put code inside your less than and greater than signs, and then put use, and then backtick code, backtick in your Markdown document, and then closing slash code. As you can see here, the HTML method will not work as easily, and at least for Jupyter Notebook, the interpreter will not recognize this as an escape backtick, so we cannot use this in HTML the same way. So here is one of the few times where I would recommend that you use your Markdown method instead of your HTML method, because the HTML method is actually not recognized by Jupyter Notebook most of the time. So please do try to use the Markdown method when you're doing escape backticks. Now we're going to move on to code blocks. So to create code blocks, we just indent all the every line of the entire block by at least 4 spaces or 1 tab, once again on your preference. So what we can do here is, of course, make sure that it is in Markdown mode, and then we put a tab, and then HTML, right, no big deal there, and then we can put head, right, then we can put a closing head, and then once again HTML. So now you can see that we have gotten a code block. We have the code formatting preserved, and everything has came out the exact way that we put it in. And the reason this is so useful is because it allows us to put code blocks within Markdown so that it's not run, but it's still there for either reference or so you can use it later. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this second part of the Markdown basics, and this is also the third part of this entire series. So first of all, congratulations on making it to this point, and just to quickly go ahead and reinstate what we did today. We started today with talking about many shortcuts, with including new shortcuts and shortcuts for things that we discussed in the first part. We talked about block quotes, standard block quotes with multiple paragraphs, nested block quotes, as well as block quotes with external elements. Then we talked about lists, including ordered lists, unordered lists, and adding elements in lists. Then we moved on to code. Code is super important even within Markdown, and we talked about code blocks, how to insert images, lists, code, and escaping backticks. Now, we finished off with code blocks today. So congratulations on making it to this point. And I would definitely recommend that before you stop programming for today, you go ahead and watch the third part so you can go ahead and wrap up Markdown and then go ahead and continue on with your day. Or if you're bold, you can go ahead and continue with this series even right after. So it's your choice, but I would definitely recommend that you at least go ahead and finish the Markdown basics right now. But other than that, thank you very much. If you did like the video, please do like, share, and subscribe. And see you next time.